everybody. Dan Illman and Mike Beer, the DRF race of the day for Thursday, March the 16th, race number 8 at Oaklawn Park. We're going 1 1/8. This is a second level allowance race with a $50,000 claiming option. Let's take a peek at this field. Please scan or click the QR code for Race of the Day access on mobile with free Formulator Pass performances. And Mike, this race goes through two very talented Ken McPeak trained horses making their 4-year-old debut. The number 3 Smile Happy is your 2-to-1 morning line favorite. We haven't seen him since the Kentucky Derby. The number 2 Creative Minister, 3-to-1 on the line, placed in last year's Preakness.
They were both pretty good as 3-year-olds, Dan. It'll be interesting to see how they come back. It's obviously a much longer layoff for the 3 Smile Happy. They may have gone a couple of races too long with Creative Minister last year. Felt like maybe he needed a little time off. They didn't run well the last time we saw him, but he was good earlier in the year last year.
Now, keep in mind that these horses are also going to have to go a very demanding distance first off the layoff, 1 1/8. Let's throw up the Timeform US Pace Projector for this race. The number 8, Seize the Night, is expected to make the lead. And Mike, you cashed out on this horse 2 starts back when he went wire to wire, and he was just in too tough last time out. I guess there's a chance he can make the front in here and slow down the pace, although Speed Bias, the number 7, is also pretty quick.
Yeah, I thought the 7 had speed right to his inside. Seize the Night is certainly fast enough. If they revert to more aggressive tactics with him this time, then they did wire that field when they stretched him out 2 back. They stepped him up in the 5th season last time. They didn't even try to make the lead with him there, and he got caught wide. He was also no match for those horses. I suspect they get aggressive with him again here. I think he goes, the 7 can go. And I also felt like the 1, Camp David, Pace Projector sort of has a mid-pack. I'll be surprised if this horse isn't right up close early.
I was just going to mention that the number 1 Camp David does have a good amount of early speed and is in very good form, stepping up in class for trainer Michael Maker. Now, this horse was purchased for $130,000 at public auction last summer, and it took him a few races to find his stride. And perhaps the most fortunate thing for these connections is that a potential claim was voided by the vet 2 starts back. He won that race, then he came back to win this start. First level allowance going 1 1/16 over a wet track, and Camp David pulls off a 23-to-1 upset, validated somewhat when the 5th place finisher returned to hit the board with a 92 buyer.
Yeah, he ran well in here. He got a great trip in this race, just sort of sitting up on the pace with one other horse. And you saw there, as they came to the top of the stretch, Dan, the closers sort of started fanning out behind them. But none of them, really made a super strong run at this horse, and he wasn't really threatened at the end. I thought he ran well last time. It was a step in the right direction. I don't know that I would want to bet him back against this field. I think this is a way better field than the one that he just beat. But he ran legitimately well last time.
Here's the number 2, Creative Minister. Classic placed last year, 3rd in the Preakness. They ran him in the Belmont. He was 5th, and he was giving up a lot of experience to many of his contemporaries in the Preakness. It was only his 4th lifetime start. Maybe you're right, Mike. They may have gone 1 or 2 races too long with him before giving him this break. Last time out in a second-level allowance at Keeneland, he was the beaten favorite. The 8th place horse from that race is now a graded stakes winner. He bounced out of that race to win at Churchill with a 92 buyer. Ken McPeak likes what he's doing in the morning. He's been working in company apparently with Rattle and Roll and Classic Causeway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that the time off did this horse some good. He obviously started out with an awful lot of potential last year. He actually ran really well in the Preakness. He wasn't unlucky really in that race, but he was a good third that day with a triple-digit buyer. He tailed off after that, Dan. But he did, I'll at least say this for him. His race 2 starts back at Churchill, he ran well that day, just missed by a nose, and it did kind of feel like trips made the difference there. He was probably best in that race. If he's ready off this layoff, he's supposed to be really tough.
The number 3 is Smile Happy, a graded stakes winner at 2, placed in graded races in his first 2 starts in 3, including a good second in the Bluegrass. He ran in the Kentucky Derby, and he ran just fine to be 8th. He was relatively close to that fast pace. He actually turned into the stretch, Mike, with a pretty big look at it, and then he flattened out. After the race, they discovered he had some bone bruising. He was done for the rest of the year, so he's going to have to do this off a pretty long layoff.
Yeah, it's a really long layoff, and I suppose that's something to be concerned about, especially if he just goes off at some kind of super short price, which I guess is possible. If nothing else, he showed a lot of talent as a young horse. He won his career debut, of course, in a two-turn route at Churchill Downs. He was really good that day. Off the layoff in the Risen Star as a 3-year-old, he ran really well behind Epicenter. And even in his Bluegrass, I thought was a really strong performance. That I thought he got a very indecisive ride early in that race, and it might have cost him at the end. I don't know. To me, this horse has a lot of ability, and I just think it's kind of telling that McPeak doesn't bring this horse back looking for a shorter race. He brings him back going 9 furlongs.
The number 4 is Tiz Right Time, who's sort of been stuck in the second level allowance condition during the Oaklawn meet. This will be his 4th attempt at it. Although last time out, he didn't face a very fast pace. They ran 1-2 all the way around the track, and he was making up a little bit of late ground to finish 4th. I also think we've probably seen his best race yet, and I wonder if that's the case for some of the more lightly raced runners.
Yeah, I agree with all that stuff. I feel like if you know, especially in particular the 2 and the 3, if they come back ready to go and improve, Tiz Right Time's probably in a little bit of trouble here. You can expect him to show up and run though, Dan. He's got to me, he's got a pretty bad running style. He really doesn't have a lot of speed, and he's going to have a lot of ground to make up in the stretch of this race. But I guess if it falls apart, he's a horse that you want to take a look at.
The number 5 is Congressman, well-bred, lightly raced son of Constitution, making his 3rd start off a long layoff, and he looked good, winning his first start back sprinting, coming from left field to win. In his most recent effort, he ran in the same race against Tiz Right Time, and he might have been compromised by the slow pace. He got into a little bit of trouble at the 8th pole, but that race had already been decided.
That's what I thought too, Dan. He was pretty strongly rated early in that race last time, but to me, he was going nowhere in the stretch of that race. Bothered, checked at the 8th pole. It's true, but he wasn't winning that race regardless. So to me, it's inconsequential. The trouble that he had, I'm really concerned that this horse isn't really going to get better as the distances get longer. And he's 4-1 on the morning line. To me, he's one of the horses I didn't really want in this race.
Keep an eye on the number 6 Presidential, making his 2nd start off a lengthy layoff for trainer Steve Asmussen. Let's watch his most recent race over a muddy surface, his first start since May, and he finished ahead of 2 next out winners, one of them that came back to win in an allowance race, a starter allowance with an 88 buyer. All in all, a fine performance first time back.
That's a good way to put it. I'll say, Dan, a fine performance for this horse. He got a great trip in this race, and he's sort of pulling away. He's the longest shot on the board in this field. I don't know. I guess he ran all right in there. He's not a horse that I was thrilled with in this race, but he is one of the horses who has upside.
The number 7 is Speed Bias. He's coming into this race off a big figure victory. We'll take a look at it right now. Now, this is a non-winners of 2 life affair, and Speed Bias might have taken advantage of a speed bias. He went right to the front in here, back down the fractions to a crawl, sprints on home over a couple of next out winners. Now it's tougher competition, likely a faster pace scenario. Still 10-1 with a 92 buyer last out isn't the worst thing in the world if you're playing.
Yeah, I agree. He could get another good trip in this race too. And it's at least worth pointing out his prior 2 victories, he wasn't on the lead in either of those. So he's not a horse who needs to make the lead in order to be effective here. He ran a pretty strong race last time. He got loose on the lead in there, but it was a fast race and he won easy.
Mr. Lucas was aggressive with the 8 Seas the Night off that victory 2 starts back, where Mike cashed out on him to the tune of a $32 mutual. They ran him in the 5th season, and he was rated wide, and that was a good race against good horses. 2 next out winners, the 4th place finisher winning an allowance with a 93 buyer. I think this jockey's going to get very aggressive from the outside post this time around and either try to get to the front or play off of speed bias. If speed bias goes, I think they'll be happy sitting off because this horse has won from off the pace in the past.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it too. I do think they're going to come out of there running and try to make the lead, but they don't have to get there. I think they just need to get forward with him in here. To me, he deserves a pass for his last race. If he can now start building off of the win 2 starts back, he's a major contender in here at a fair price, Dan. And to me, he's a horse who we still haven't seen his best race.
Before we take a look at our top selections, please click the subscribe button on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel for the latest DRF videos. With names like presidential, Congressman, and Camp David in this race, there are certainly some political overtones. But as we take a look at our top selection for the race of the day, we're both simply going to smile happy. First start off the Derby, going to have to be sharp and ready to go off the bench. I liked what we saw last year.
I did too. Again, it's you probably don't want to go too short on him coming off of this kind of a layoff, Dan. But this horse has a lot of talent. I'm expecting him if they can keep him on the track this year. I think he's going to have a really good 4-year-old campaign, and this is a good place to get it started off.
3285 for Mike, 3746 for me in our Thursday DRF race of the day, the 8th at Oaklawn. Good luck.